said the church is still God's church. The church is God's church. The church is a part of God. The church isn't going anywhere. The church is going to do well. The church is going to grow. The church is going to prosper. We are the church. Turn to your neighbor and say, you are the church. So church, we have to do our part. Church, we have to do what we're called to do. When God reveals to you something going on in your life, if you act ugly and someone tells you act ugly, don't get angry at them. You know when you act ugly. Yes. Amen? When someone says that reveals a fault in your life, maybe they're not saying it the right way. Maybe they're not saying it the proper way. I can understand that. But we get upset. The Word of God says, agree with thine adversary. When there's things going on in our lives, and we know things are going on in our lives, and someone tells us, I want to help you, there's something going on. Instead of getting embarrassed for prideful reasons, how about saying, it's the truth, I do need help in that area. Does anyone need help in their lives right now? Does anyone need help? Well, how come when you're broken, someone says, well, give more to God, and you get upset? Or how come you get mad at somebody when they say all you do is frown, when all you do is frown? We want to get upset when someone says you gossip, you go around the house, you're frowning, you're mean, and you're this and you're that. If someone says it to you, someone shares that with you, it'd be a lot more pleasant if you would smile a little more, you'd act a little better around the house. Well, why don't you act better? How are you going to tell me? Why do we always have to put it back on someone else? If we know we act a certain way, what's wrong with saying, you're right, I'm going to work on that. I'm going to work on that for my life. Because God's always trying to make us better. Amen? God's always trying to make us better. This isn't about pleasing us. It's not about stroking our ego. It's not about that. I know people don't always say things nice and they don't always say things the right way. But the truth is the truth. When something is said to us and it's the truth about us, how about we own up to it? Why don't we own up to it sometime? Try that. Everybody smiling? Or you go to that person, you want to talk about somebody. I heard this about them, and I heard that. And then that person you're talking to stands up with the boldness of God and says, you know what? Why don't you pray for them instead of talk about them? Or maybe you don't know the whole truth. You're hearing one side. Maybe you're just hearing one side. You don't know the whole truth. Why don't you find out the whole truth before you go judging that person? And when someone tells us the truth like that, and even in love, they say just as nice as pie, we want to get upset with them. Oh, they think they're better than me. Think they're better than you because they say don't gossip? No, they're trying to help you. God's using them to minister to you. Amen? I feel so good right now. Because I know you feel better. Getting that off your shoulders. I know you feel better. Huh? People, this is a real walk. This is a this is a true walk. The things that we do and say, God's watching you. God has his eyes on the church. It's time for us to stop sitting at home and passing judgment and talking about people in the church and receiving lies. We listen to a sinner talk about the church. We listen to sinners talk about a person sitting right next to you, and we believe the sinner, what they say about your church, about your family. And we know them to be a liar. And we still listen to it. You know a person to be a liar. You know a person to be a troublemaker. You know a person not to be right because they do it to you. And they say something about one of your family members. Instead of you standing up and saying, don't speak against my church. Don't speak against my family member. Don't speak. Who's going to rise up for God? Who's going to stand up for you? Who's going to stand up for me? Who's going to do that? You know them to be a liar. You know them to be troublemakers. How come they're not sitting in church with you right now? Okay, so you say, you say you're in their life to minister to them. How come they're not in church? How come there's a different reason every week? How come they're not in fellowship? If they're so concerned about you, if they're so concerned about people in your church, how come they're not here giving their life to Christ and helping rather than hurting? But I tell you what, you want to know about revelation knowledge? You want to know what God is doing right now? I'm going to tell you right now, he's mixing up stuff. God told me he's sending a storm in some houses. He's sending a storm and he's mixing up some stuff. And he's expelling some people that shouldn't be in your life. We keep holding on. We keep holding on to folks. We keep holding on to stuff that God said let go of a long time ago. And we try and hold on. And we try and play God and we try and change the situation. But we don't have the power nor the authority to change a situation. Only God can do such a thing. Only God can do that. So don't be surprised. Some of these folks you've been around, don't be surprised if they get to stepping, if they get to skipping out. Amen? Don't come weeping and crying saying, oh God, what am I going to do without him? God says, what are you going to do without me? What are you going to do without me? What are you going to do without me? Hallelujah. In Matthew chapter 11, let me read something to you here. There's just one Jesus, people. There's just one Jesus. Matthew 11:1 says, and it came to pass. People, this is on me so heavy right now. I want our church. We had a good time last week, didn't we? Didn't we have a good time last week? Everybody had a good time with me? We had a lot of people here. But I want to tell you, God is busier than the enemy is. God is busier than the enemy. And I believe he's touched some folks. He touched some people. We're going to see them again. Regardless of that, we're going to begin to grow because God's going to empower you to go and witness and tell folks. God's going to give you the faith to stand and believe him and trust him. God's going to do that. He's going to do that. God's going to use you. Tell your neighbor, say, God's going to use you. So don't look at who's here and who's not here. Look at yourself and look at what God wants to do with you. God's going to do something in you. And I'm excited for you. I'm excited about it. Verse 1 says, and it came to pass, when Jesus had made an end of commanding his 12 disciples, he departed thence to teach and to preach in their cities. So Jesus, he sent forth his disciples. He gave them instruction. God's giving you instruction. Today is a day of instruction. God's giving you instruction today. God's saying it's time for the church to straighten up. The church is not a mess. The church is not a mess. The church is just getting started. God's getting ready to move. God's getting ready to do some things in his church. He's going to do some stuff. God's going to do some stuff in his body. You better get ready. You better get ready. God's getting ready to move in the body of Christ. Verse 2 says, now when John had heard in the prison the works of Christ, he sent 2 of his disciples and said unto him, art thou he that should come, or do we look for another? So he sent 2 of his disciples. John was in prison, getting ready to get his head cut off. He's getting ready to die. He was preparing to die. Many people said this passage meant John wasn't sure, and in a lack of faith, in a down moment, he was wondering if Jesus was the one that was supposed to come. That's not what was happening here. John was Jesus' first cousin. John grew up with Jesus. John hung out with Jesus. He knew who Jesus was. Amen? He knew. He wasn't wondering if Jesus was the Messiah. He wasn't wondering if Jesus was going to do what he promised he would do, what God had promised, what the prophets had prophesied. That's not what he was wondering. There's a lot of times in our lives, people, we sit around waiting and waiting and waiting. Say, God, are you going to, God, am I the one that you're going to use like you promised you? You know what God has promised you. You already know. God has promised you some things. God says he wants to use you. God, he's prophesied that to you, laid hands on you, healed you, delivered you, freed you up of some things. God did that for you. You know who God is. You know who Jesus is. If you know who Jesus is, give him a praise. Give him a loud praise. A loud praise. You know who Jesus is. No doubt. There's no doubt in your mind. You know who Jesus is. No doubt in my mind that you know who Jesus is. Amen? John hung out with Jesus. He wasn't wondering if Jesus was who he says he was. What was going on at that time? There were two thoughts out there among the Pharisees and the religious leaders. There were 2 thoughts. One thought was they were looking for a suffering Messiah. Okay? So there were 2 teachings. And number 2, they were looking for a reigning king Messiah. So some were teaching that there was only one coming, and some were teaching that there were 2 Messiahs coming. There was one first that was going to come and suffer and die, and then another that was going to come and reign as king. They didn't understand that Jesus was coming to die for us and then reign as king. Amen? They didn't understand that. But you understand that because of the Jesus who lives on the inside of you. So this is what John was saying. He says, I just want to make sure. I want to hear it from you. Are we looking for another? I know you're the Messiah. I know you're the king. He said, they're saying we should look for another. Should we look for another? And Jesus said, look, tell John this. Tell him that, he says, go and show John again those things which you do hear and see. The blind receive their sight, the lame walk, the lepers are cleansed, and the deaf hear. The dead are raised up, and the poor have the gospel preached to them. And blessed is he, blessed are you, whosoever shall not be offended, if you're not ashamed in me. That's the key right there. Jesus said, look, the deaf can hear, the blind can see, the dead are raised up. There's all kinds of stuff going on. There's revelation knowledge flowing in the church, flowing in the body. God's revealing to his people what he's going to do. There's dancers on the praise team. Hallelujah. There's musicians. There's singers. There's ushers. We're all glorifying God. We know who Jesus is. People, you know who Jesus is. Now he's saying walk by faith and not by sight. Don't go by what you see. We have to stop walking by what we see, and we have to begin to walk by faith. Trusting God. Believing God. Not believing your situation, but knowing that God is going to do what he said he's going to do. God's going to do everything that he promised. God's going to fix things for you.